Okay, I guess we can get started. I see that Donovan, aka Anthony, is in the house. Let me get our screen ready to share. Since we finished the material in Monday's lecture, we went through the material for the week. I wanted to share some videos with you, probably take maybe 20 minutes, maybe a little less. Going kind of just giving you a little extra information for this week of the material we're covering. So that's what we're going to be doing. I do want to remind you that you have a discussion. The initial post is due Friday by 11:59 p.m. and you must be replying to at least two classmates by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. You also have another assignment. You have an assignment 14.2. It's over the product life cycle. It is going to be a paper. Um, it said at least 4 pages in length. I would be happy. I believe I put an announcement out saying if you do at least three, I'll accept that for full credit. Um, yeah, I put out an announcement on that I changed that. So the length requirement is only going to have to be 3 pages, 3 to 4. Okay. Don't do less than three. We need at least 3 pages to properly discuss this material, but four might be a little excessive. So I went ahead and reduced that. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our first video. Remember, this week we're talking about the, let me go back to our area in Canvas. We are talking about the product lifestyle. We're talking about greenwashing, businesses, and environmental sustainability. So I got a couple videos over some of these concepts for you to look at. And here's our first one.
2022 is the year to achieve a net zero economy, to find solutions and policies in the sustainability space, ideas that will truly move the goalposts of how we can create a nature-positive future. We believe that it is precisely in the high-emitting sectors where some of the most important work is being done. Fabric Nano is a biotech startup who has found a way to sustainably synthesize bioplastics and fossil fuel-free chemical ingredients at scale, and produce those chemicals 100 times faster than normal petroleum-based products. Their breakthroughs could mean that cell-free manufacturing could finally transcend niche to become commonplace. After a hugely successful retrofit of the Empire State Building in New York City, a program called the Empire Building Challenge is providing $50 million in funding to high-rise building owners to pilot innovative retrofit solutions. Although new buildings are easy to make green, old ones make up 80 to 90% of our usage, and this is where we need to make sustainability gains. The best solutions will be shared widely with other building owners across New York State to create a network of sustainable practice. Making electricity from human-powered steps is a concept that has been around for a while, but without a lot of market uptake. But new technology developed by 2 Swiss labs means that for the first time, we can create electricity from wooden flooring. Wood is one of the most sustainable and popular building materials, but its electroneutrality has meant that it has been relatively ignored for energy harvesting. These scientists found a way to modify it with silicon and nanocrystals, relatively environmentally friendly procedures, making it triboelectric. What if you could grow wood in a lab? Researchers at MIT have not only discovered how to replicate wood by isolating tunable plant tissues, but also to grow it in specific shapes, thereby reducing waste. Even though wood can be grown sustainably, this new technology has the capacity to transform our use of biomaterials and combat deforestation. Making affordable fashion sustainable is the goal of this global e-commerce brand. Everything is handmade to order in Spain and Portugal. Most importantly, they only make what is ordered, totally reducing unsold production waste. For every item ordered, they encourage you to resell something you no longer want. They also offset their carbon footprint and donate material scraps to independent fashion brands. With an annual average growth rate of 100%, this pioneering, stockless fashion brand is on the rise. Buying up carbon credits to satisfy sustainability goals is not going to fully get us to net zero. Nature-positive business solutions require that a price be put on negative externalities, and two companies are helping to do just that. NCAPES is a UN-funded research project that is laying the groundwork for environmental and ecosystem accounting. With pilots in Brazil, China, India, Mexico, and South Africa, the project is developing the tools, language, and structure for how we can measure the value of ecosystem services. Similarly, Invest has created a set of modeling tools to evaluate the impact of investments in natural infrastructure in cities. The software models the links between nature and the well-being of populations, demonstrating the way investors can become allies to nature. But investing in nature can also mean investing in nature. Costa Rica is the first tropical country to have halted and actually reversed deforestation. By taxing fossil fuels, the government has financed a $500 million payout to landowners, saving more than 1 million hectares of forest and replanting 7 million trees. Whilst many good programs exist around the world, Costa Rica has been recognized as one of the most successful due to political will and a passion for and recognition of the importance of their environment.
I think it's interesting. What was it? I think the seventh example they presented, they discussed the carbon tax. And we talked about that a few weeks ago, where companies are able to pay to be able to pollute more. So they got to pay more, but they're able to do more pollution. And that's not going to get us where we need to be in a sustainable way. So I think it's very interesting that there are organizations and projects out there to try to change that. I really do. I find that really encouraging. Let's watch one more on businesses and the future. Let's look at one about climate change and opportunities for business.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting starts in
I like to think of it in sort of 5 silos. The first one is technology, and there's sort of technology optimism and opportunity that obviously everyone in the valley sort of naturally gravitates towards. I would say the second one is business models. And I think you can have business model innovation. Business models are actually very interesting because suddenly you look at centralized manufacturing versus when you're, let's say, recycling, you're looking at decentralized manufacturing and much more localized manufacturing or demanufacturing, which allows for very interesting job impacts and local economy effects. The third one is policy. So there's that pillar of like how you can innovate on policy. Fourth one is finance and investment, and we've got experts here who I think can speak much more to that. But I think that the concept in my mind is how can you innovate on capital frameworks that allow for rewards in the long run and recognize that sustainability always is cheaper in the long run. And so it's just a question of time frames. And the fifth and final one is consumer behavior. And so consumer behavior, how do you sort of both capitalize on changing consumer behavior? For example, the renting economy, where you're much more interested in optimizing resource utilization, which in the end has an effect on the climate. So just as an example. So that's my vibe.
When I think about climate change, it's interesting because everything that is an optimization is actually really related to climate change. So I think about when I just think about the supply chain, when I think about anything, if you use less energy, you're better off. And so the way that we think about getting the buy-in of big companies in general, everything they do is we make it more efficient. That's why they're doing it. A lot of people won't do solar because it's cheaper. The government is actually sponsoring solar in many ways and incentivizing it. They do it because it's cost effective for them when you actually add up all the cost structures to them specifically. Optimizing is a really important facet. If you optimize around energy or a constraint of energy, you will essentially create a lot of value. It could be in any sector in any way possible, but it's an efficiency. It's a way of gaining and creating that efficiency, which means you can probably make more money doing it, which makes it an interesting incentive to move forward on.
What we're really looking for in our investment thesis is for an overlap of what's good for the consumer and what's good for the world. And we think that there's a lot of power in that intersection. And so we think a lot about how to create more value that actually results in things that are good for climate change. So how can you align sort of consumer value proposition with things that are good for the world? And increasingly, the world is shifting such that there's a lot of possibility there. We're even beyond creating efficiencies and companies that are figuring out really great brand and design that has a synergy with something that's also good for the planet. I think there's just tremendous opportunity for innovation there, and that's a big part of what we focus on when we evaluate companies.
We're going to get to where we need to be. There's three main things. One is massive efficiency improvements. The other is electrification of a bunch of processes. But what makes that actually worthwhile is then cleaning up the source of electricity. If you do those three things, those are the big things, you're on a pathway. And guess what? Some of those make economic sense. Like today, they make economic sense. Efficiencies always make sense. Price of renewable power, clean power, has dropped so precipitously. People would not have predicted this. So, drops of 85% over the last 7 years for solar, 67% for wind over the past 7 years. They're now striking PPAs for solar that are under 3 cents a kilowatt hour. That, like 5 years ago, no one would have said that. That is cheaper than coal today. That's cheaper almost than built coal, like just marginal coal. So it's shocking where the world has gone. And there are parts of the world where it's much cheaper with respect to energy. It is the biggest industry in the world, and it's also the foundation of everything we kind of take for granted or know. Communications, education, transportation. It's all based on energy. And just in the electricity infrastructure alone, it's like $48 trillion. It's trillion with a T. It's going to be required over the next 20 years to deploy this infrastructure. Well, if that's not opportunity, double-digit T, recognition that it's an important and opportunistic place, and a world that's now shifted to recognize that. I don't know what else is. So we're super excited.
What I find really fascinating in that video, there's really two things that really impacted me. The first lady that was talking, she said that sustainability always wins out in the long term. And that is so true. If we in business can seek sustainability at all levels, from sustainability of our products, our organization, our processes, all the way into environmental sustainability, long term, we're going to see a consistent growth in our profit. We're going to see an ability to maintain that growth. It's going to help with competitive advantage, I believe. I think the sustainability is really the next major front in competitive advantage, as far as the KPIs and benchmark points of that. So anyway, another thing I found interesting, the second part, was that last gentleman that was talking, mentioning about how clean energy is now so cheap. Wind energy is even down to 3 cents per kilowatt hour. That is really cheap. We have the ability to produce clean energy. Why are we not doing this at a greater scale? So these are just things I want you thinking about as some of you are getting ready to graduate and some of you are getting ready to go into your senior year. Be thinking about sustainability, not just now, but in your professional life thereafter. Okay, let me take this, stop this, and I need to refresh this page. I hope. There we go. I found
what EMF does. It starts to increase.
No, I don't want him talking. Okay, here we go. Should have it down here. Product life cycle. We're going to watch a video about the product life cycle here. I have two videos. We might get through one of them. We may do the other one. Let's first of all see here. Let me see what this first one, how well it is, how comprehensive it is. So this is about product life cycle.
Explains the various stages that a typical product will go through and what a business can do to increase demand during each stage using Coca-Cola and Apple's iPhone as real-life examples. Product life cycle is an important concept in marketing. It describes the stages a product goes through, right from the point that the product is just an initial design idea in the research and development stage, until the point that the product is finally removed from the market at the end of its life. However, it's important to note that not all products reach this final stage. Some continue to grow, while others rise and fall very quickly. Ultimately, it is critical that marketers understand the life cycle of their product, and business executives should have a plan for dealing with products at every stage of their life cycle. So, first of all, the product life cycle starts at the research and development stage. This tends to be very time-consuming and costly as the product is being designed and isn't yet produced. Therefore, there are no sales, so cash flow is negative at this stage. The next stage is introduction, which is when the product is launched to the market. Typically, the business would invest heavily in marketing and promotion of the product, and cash flow would usually be negative at this stage. Pricing strategies are important at this stage, and both penetration pricing and price skimming are common strategies used to attract those early adopters or loyal fans to purchase the product and get the ball rolling. Following the introduction of the product, sales would typically start to grow. Therefore, the growth stage comes next, and is where sales start to increase rapidly alongside demand for the product. Also, competitors may appear with similar products as they try to replicate the business's success. This is typically the stage in which cash flow starts to turn positive, and the business starts to see a profit from the product. The next stage is maturity, which is when demand for the product starts to stagnate. Although the product is typically well established and well known at this stage, it tends to stagnate as there will also be high competition in the market. However, a key positive for the business is that the product is well established, so cost of production and investment in marketing is typically much lower. Therefore, cash flow tends to still be positive during this stage. Common strategies during the maturity stage include managing production levels to ensure the business doesn't overproduce, whilst distributing the product to more businesses and retailers to reach a wider audience, commonly with a lower price tag. Following the maturity of the product, it enters the decline stage, within which sales start to decrease and the market is oversaturated with both competition and availability of products. This leads to supply being higher than demand, which is commonly influenced by advancements in technology and changes in consumer buying behaviour. Therefore, it is typical for a business to experience negative cash flow within this stage, which eventually leads to the production and marketing of the product being stopped to minimise costs, whilst the price is cut to clearance to sell off the final batch of units. Now, it's very important to understand that a business can actually prolong the life cycle before it enters the decline stage through product extension strategies. If you consider the life cycle of Coca-Cola, when their original product, Coca-Cola Classic, hit the maturity stage, they have had many strategies over the years to extend their brand and their core product. This is typically through something called a line extension. Examples of this include Diet Coke, which is one of the most famous line extensions for the company, mainly targeting females to purchase the famous soft drink. Then, as the trend grew and health concerns around sugar became much more serious, they tried to attract males to a sugar-free alternative by introducing Coca-Cola Zero. Other line extensions include Cherry Coke, and more recently in 2014, Coca-Cola Life, which had a very short life cycle and was taken off sale in 2017, just 3 years after its release, so Coca-Cola could simplify the choice between sugar and sugar-free options in the UK. Another extension strategy would be brand extension. An example of this would be Coca-Cola using their brand to expand into a new market. For example, selling a range of chewing gum, essentially using the brand of Coca-Cola to help the product become established in a new market much quicker. Other examples of common extension strategies include advertising, with the aim of gaining a new audience or reminding the current audience of the product. You've then got price reduction, to make the product more attractive to customers. You've then got adding value to the product, such as adding new features to the current product, for example, improving the specifications on a smartphone. Exploring new markets, such as selling the product in new geographical areas or creating a version targeted at different segments of the market, is also quite a commonly used product extension strategy. And one final strategy is new packaging, which is used to generate interest and attract people to the product. Just have a think, have you experienced any of these product extension strategies in your lifetime? Have you seen any products that you've been buying for years and all of a sudden they've had a change, whether that's a change in packaging, the way they've been advertised to you, or are you getting more of the added value? Just have a think whether you've ever experienced that. It's most likely that you have. So now we will have a look at the product life cycle of Apple's iPhone. The iPhone was introduced to the market in 2007, reporting 1.39 million sales. They hit the growth stage fairly quickly, increasing from 1.39 million sales in their first year to 11.63 million sales in 2008. That's an increase of 736%.
Why do I use Navan?
No one asked you.
It makes managing business travel spend.
Apple's iPhone sales continued to grow for 8 years, from 2008 to 2015. Surprisingly, having their biggest growth in the final year of this stage of the product life cycle. A staggering increase of 62 million sales on top of 2014's 169 million sales. However, what you can clearly see from 2016 onwards is the iPhone hitting the maturity stage, within which sales actually decreased for the first time ever, a 19.3 million decrease in unit sales in comparison to the previous year. As you can see, sales in 2016 to 2018 have actually plateaued, a clear indicator that the iPhone is currently in the maturity stage. So the question is, after a very strong first decade, what's left for the Apple iPhone? Will the product remain in the maturity stage for the next decade, or will Apple actually innovate a brand new concept which will cause the iPhone to enter the decline stage, just like the iPhone did to the iPod? So to finish off, we're just going to look at a few key advantages and important limitations that should be considered when making business decisions using the product life cycle. First of all, the product life cycle helps the business to forecast sales trends over their lifetime. During a product's life, it allows the business to assess which stage the product is in, which helps the business to adapt their strategy to increase sales and, importantly, to minimize the likelihood of it entering the decline stage. It also allows a business to view its whole product portfolio across the product life cycle to assess where their next investment is best spent. And it is a very simple tool for a business to use. With the more data a business has, the more accurate it becomes. Now moving on to the limitations that the business should consider when making investment decisions after using the product lifecycle model. First of all, not all products will follow the typical shape of the life cycle. Whilst it is common that all products go through each stage, it cannot be assumed that they will. For example, some products may excel through the growth stage for years before hitting the maturity stage, whilst others may quickly move from the growth stage straight into decline and miss the maturity stage completely, which can happen in instances such as being replaced by innovation from competitors or demanding the market overall declines quickly. However, a key consideration for a business is that the product life cycle is only a prediction, a theory, not an exact science if you like. Therefore, the product life cycle model should not be used in...
Okay, I have to pause right there. When he said a theory, not an exact science, that makes the researcher, the social scientist in me, cringe. Theories are exact science. Okay. The only thing that separates a theory from a fact is time. For something to be considered a theory, it has, first of all, gone through being an idea, an hypothesis. It has been thoroughly tested by many, many people across many different fields. It has been analyzed in peer review and has been shown to always consistently be true. So then it's classified as a theory. Once something has been a theory, typically for quite a number of decades, then we adopt it as a fact, a known fact. Okay, so technically something like gravity is a theory, but that doesn't mean that we can alter gravity somehow. No, factually, gravity exists. It's just hasn't been known long enough to be considered a fact. I think with gravity, we could say that. Go all the way back to Newton. So that really makes me cringe. Okay, theory is factual. So that right there made me cringe. Let's go ahead and continue this. We're just about done with this video.
In isolation to make investment decisions. Hopefully that's helped you to get to grips with the product life cycle. If it has, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for lots more upcoming business studies videos.
All right, I hope that you noticed that the product life cycle directly forecasts, predicts, and tracks the cost of the product, the cost the organization spends, what they charge the customers, how that price fluctuates. Now, when you go to the store and you're used to buying a product at a certain price, you know that it might be the product life cycle that's affecting a decline in that price. The price is coming down because it's hit the maturity stage or it's in the decline stage. Of course, other factors can affect the price too, such as the economy in general, the market, etc., things like that. But the product life cycle is a player in the cost. So I hope that these videos today help you to grasp the concepts that we discussed Monday a little bit better. If you have any questions, for those of you not in this classroom today, please send me an email. Do I have any questions from the students in the Zoom meeting today?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, well, I'll be putting this video up probably within the next 40 minutes or so, and keep up with your work in Canvas. You have a discussion. Remember, initial post is due by Friday, and the replies are due by Sunday, and then you have a paper to write. That paper, it says in the instructions, a 4-page paper. I will accept a 3-page paper, and you won't lose points. A 3-page paper is more than satisfactory for this particular assignment. So I posted that in the announcements, and hopefully everybody knows. I think I sent an email out about it too. Anyway, you have a great day, and I will see you Monday here in the class and on Zoom.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
No problem, Donovan. You take care.
You too. Have a good one.
All right, Viles.